Stone killed his brother Isaac 50 years ago when he was only 11 years old. He beat him to death over a small argument, and then tried to cover his tracks by dragging his poor brother's body out to the bridge and throwing him off the railing with a noose tied around his neck. No one could prove that he did it, but it was common knowledge around our small town. Since then, he had spent his life in and out of prison for various crimes: arson, assault, armed robbery, drug trafficking. The latter was how I found myself with my hands zip-tied and my ribs kicked in on his barn floor, surrounded by his sons and crew. "I'm only going to ask you so many times before I gut you," he bellowed, spit flying from his scarred and battered face. I was terrified, completely paralyzed. I had been dealing his drugs out at my high school and making a fortune doing so. I had never met him until today, and after being kidnapped and driven to their property, I was marched into the barn with a bag over my head and then kicked repeatedly. I was gasping on the floor, desperately trying to take air into my lungs, unable to speak. My wild eyes took in the scowling faces around me, hoping the torture would end soon. "Tell me what happened to Jay." Stone was now holding me by the throat and pulling me off the floor. "I told you I don't know," I tried to cry out, choking. I was lying. I did know. I had been instructed not to say anything about Jay, his whereabouts, or his death. The truth was hard enough for me to understand, but I really didn't feel I was being untruthful. Jay was Stone's youngest son. He was the one I always met with. I had wanted to earn his trust, knowing he was the top of the ladder in the drug game. His eyes looked like they had both seen something completely different. His right wide and twinkling, and his left cold and piercing. We had a weekly meeting at the bridge, a monolith made of stone, overlooking a fast-moving river. The path leading to it ran alongside railroad tracks that were no longer used or maintained, giving the place a post-apocalyptic character. Something had been different yesterday. I had felt it in the pit of my stomach from the very beginning of my journey. The woods around me felt like they were watching. Every sound seemed like it was so much louder than it should have been. The sudden appearance of another person on the path threw me out of my jumbled thoughts. There, only 10 yards from me, was a scrawny teen staring at me. I felt an annoyed sort of anger rising in me for being so startled by this strange kid. "Hey, you! Who the fuck are you?" I spat at the boy. After taking a few more seconds to stare at me, the boy waved awkwardly, like he wasn't sure how to. "Are you Tommy?" The boy spoke hurriedly, glancing nervously around as if someone might hear him. I scoffed, trying to imagine what this kid could possibly be doing out here, and how he would know my name. "Yeah, and who the fuck are you? Why are you out here, following me around or something? You should walk away, man." I barked at him, and took a few steps toward the boy. Surprisingly, he stood his ground. "I'm here. I need you to help me, Tommy," he stuttered. I couldn't believe the boy had the courage to approach me like this. My patience with him had run out, and I remembered the anxiety I had been having moments before. I tried to keep my voice even. "All right, enough. I have shit to do. You need to get the hell away from me and keep your voice low," I growled as I took more steps towards the boy, but he still remained in place, blocking the path with its small frame. I was never one to back down from anyone, but for some reason, I felt genuine fear when looking down at this boy I could easily bludgeon. Behind his thick lenses, the boy's eyes burned with a calm fury that couldn't be seen from afar. They were light blue, so light they were almost white. I could see my silhouette in those evil pupils, could almost feel myself being trapped inside them. Chills ran down my spine, unnerved by the stark contradiction between the boy's gaze and the rest of his mannerisms. "You should see something," he nearly whispered, turning up the trail and looking back to make sure I would follow. We walked slowly onward. I was feeling strangely compelled to see what was in store. I couldn't shake the feeling in the pit of my stomach that something was seriously wrong with this boy. Had he been spying on me all these times I had walked this path? It was the only way he might have known my name. He couldn't be from the school. Anyone as bizarre as this would stand out too much to go unnoticed in this small town. As we neared the bridge, I realized I was holding my breath. My heart was beating loudly in my ears. "It's over there," the boy said, pointing over the edge of the bridge. I felt like I was involuntarily moving in my body. Each step felt mechanical. I braced myself as I gripped the railing. There, on the rocky banks by the river, I could see a body lying face down. I knew it was Jay. Waves of shock were coursing through me. I felt like I couldn't get any air into my lungs. Oh shit. I went around the railing, descending as carefully as I could on the slippery rocks. The boy stood above, watching me struggle down. Jay's corpse was badly mangled. His legs were splayed out at awful angles, one with the femur protruding. My stomach lurched as I finally reached him, retching several times before reaching out a trembling hand to turn him over. I wished I hadn't. I knew the face I saw would haunt my dreams for the rest of my life. The right side was completely caved in, leaving Jay's cold, accusing left eye to look blankly into mine. I was too shocked to look away. I felt hot tears swarming, and I saw the blood that I had stepped in, kneeled in, had gotten on my hands. I retched again. "You did this!" I bellowed up at the boy, lines of thick bile trailing from my mouth. "What the fuck is wrong with you?" The boy said nothing. He just watched as I scrambled down to the river and tried to scrub my hands clean. My mind was in a full panic. What was I supposed to do now? Jay was my main contact, meaning that when he didn't return from this weekly transaction, I would have his crew to worry about. They would assume that I had done this to rob him. They would most likely kill me in the most horrible manner they could imagine. I was again startled by the boy, who had somehow climbed down the rocks without making a sound and was now standing behind me. I leapt to my feet and felt rage bubbling under my skin. "Do you realize what you've done? You killed him, man! You fucking killed him!" I screamed. The boy's stoic demeanor enraged me. I lunged forward and grabbed the boy's shoulders. "Stop!" The boy's single word had more force behind it than a freight train. I instantly let go. A primal fear had seized my body. I looked at the boy in horror. Something deep inside me had been triggered. Something that I couldn't explain. I felt as helpless as a newborn child looking up at a hungry wolf. I moved away, stumbling backward and tripping over Jay's body. I had to turn away from Jay's horrible mangled face once more and began sobbing. "Why? What do you want from me?" I choked out in between gasps and sputters. The boy walked over to me and crouched down. I wanted to look away from him, but I was bound by some terrifying force. "You're going to help me, Tommy." The sun had gone down, long before I emerged from the trail. Reality felt like it was eroding away. The events of the day had left me exhausted and defeated. The street I was on was less than half a mile from my home. It felt like I would never reach it. I had to remain undetected. Anybody who saw me would recognize me. I tried my best to seem nonchalant as I passed by houses. I arrived at my back door before I realized I was there. Once inside, I could hear the TV playing from my father's room. The odds were high that he had fallen asleep in front of it while waiting for me to arrive. As soundlessly as I could, I ascended the stairs to my bedroom. My clothes were worse than I thought they had been in the dark. Clumps of clay and dirt were covering my sleeves all the way up to the elbows. Jay's blood was still on every article, standing out the most on the knees of my jeans. I stripped them off and placed them inside my closet, then headed for the shower. The warm water running onto me only made me think of the river. Jay's butchered face was tattooed into the back of my eyelids. No matter how hard I tried to push the image away, he stayed glaring back. Jay had not deserved the burial he was given. Nobody did. The boy had told me what to do, and my body would not disobey. I had picked Jay off the rocks, his body leaving behind a sickening puddle of blood. The boy placed rocks over it, and soon it was hidden from sight. I moved him to where the boy led me, deep into the woods. He walked ahead of me to a spot that was obscured by thick undergrowth. There, I saw a shovel waiting for me. "You think you're some kind of mastermind? Is that what this is? You planned this whole thing?" I asked incredulously. The boy said nothing and handed the shovel to me. Carrying Jay this far had exhausted me. I had no intention of taking the shovel from the boy. "You want to do this? You dig." I swatted the shovel away. The boy let the shovel fall to the ground and looked down at it. Without looking up, he breathed out angrily, "It's best if you do what I say." His voice so low I barely heard him. I found myself digging. Soon I had finished Jay's grave. I peered at it, unable to comprehend that I was about to lay Jay here to decompose. I tried to place him in gently, but the ground under my feet began to crumble. I had to let go of his corpse. Jay's body landed face down. I lowered myself into the grave and turned him over. The right side of his face was now a grisly scene of blood and dirt. I climbed out quickly, not wanting to see the accusatory eye a second longer. I began to bury Jay, weeping as I did. I glanced at the boy, who wore no expression. It sickened me. After I was done, the boy covered the grave with leaves and branches. It was done expertly. There was nothing to point out that the ground had been moved beneath. He turned to look at me. We stayed looking at each other for a moment. Then the boy started walking away. "Where are you going? What now?" I called after him. The boy didn't turn around to reply. "You will see me again," is all he offered. I didn't understand. I was about to ask more, but when I looked back to the place the boy had been, there was nothing. He was gone. A knocking at the bathroom door made me jump. My father was awake. "Hey, Tom, you been out real late. What were you doing?" My father's raspy voice called. I thought for a moment. "Just out with a girl. Sorry," I replied. "That figures. Always out doing something and never bothering to say a damn word about it." His voice trailed off as he walked away. I shut the water off and dried myself. I opened the door and looked down the hallway. My father's door was closed, giving me the opportunity to take the matches from the kitchen. I went back up to my room and retrieved my clothes. I snuck through the garage and took a tank of gasoline and a shovel, slipping outside and leaving through the gate in the backyard. Again, I found myself digging a hole. The woods behind my house provided ample places to burn my items. Shoveling brought up the imagery of Jay being buried. It made me sick. I worked quickly and threw everything into the pit. As I was about to pour the gasoline, I heard the voice of the boy. Tomorrow they will come. It had come out of nowhere. I whipped around, terror gripping me, but there was no one there. I stood, breathing heavily. Had I imagined it? After I lit the pile of clothes and watched them burn to ash, I buried them and tried to cover the hole the way I had seen the boy do earlier. I was satisfied with it. It was unlikely that anyone would be walking here anyways. As soon as I got back to my room, I flopped face down onto the bed. I fell asleep quickly. I did not dream. My body simply couldn't expend any more energy. The sun broke through the dark curtains in my room at 7 each morning. This usually awoke me in time for school, but it didn't this day. Instead, I was met by my father pounding on the door. "You're late! I'm leaving now!" he yelled. I heard him stomp down the steps and open the garage door. The engine started and he was gone, leaving me alone. I couldn't move. All of the events from the day before went racing by like a sinister highlight reel. I felt the nausea again. Then the fear picked up where it had left off the day before. What now? I couldn't force myself to move, or even open my eyes. Get up! It's just another day! I was past the point of being startled by the boy's voice entering my brain. I didn't even open my eyes to see if he was standing there this time. I need to stay here, I whimpered. But despite my words, I was rising from the bed against my will. I got dressed and gathered my school books into my backpack, thankfully skipping breakfast. I always drove to school, even though the drive was less than 2 minutes. But today I found myself walking. They will be waiting for you. The boy's disembodied voice was right in my ears. After a minute, I crossed onto the main road. A large black pickup turned its engine on and drove straight at me. The passenger got out. A huge man riding in the bed of the pickup jumped over the side. Both men grabbed me by the arms and lifted me off my feet. Another vehicle approached, a black Cadillac. The men put a burlap bag over my head and zip-tied my hands. They placed me in the trunk. I struggled and screamed for help all the while. The car accelerated quickly, hitting bumps and potholes indiscriminately. I was slammed against the walls and was having difficulty breathing inside the bag. I kicked at the trunk, hurting my feet in the process. They won't know anything unless you tell them. The boy's voice again rang in my ears. I tried to control my breathing. After half an hour, the car left the pavement and turned onto a dirt path. It journeyed a short way before coming to an abrupt stop. The doors opened and slammed shut. Then footsteps approached. I remained still and tried to focus on my breathing as the trunk was opened. The men who had grabbed me off the street hauled me to my feet and removed the bag from my head. The big one looked into my terror-stricken eyes with indifference. "You're going to tell us what the fuck is going on," he said calmly, putting his hands on my shoulders. "Walk," he screamed into my face, changing his tone quickly. I looked at where we were, presuming it to be where Jay had been living. It was a large complex with multiple buildings that resembled warehouses. We were walking towards a barn. The man leading me pushed me to the ground once we were inside. I looked at the group of men standing around me. Some of them were clearly Jay's brothers. I couldn't keep myself from shaking. "Okay, Tommy, where the fuck is Jay?" The large man accented his question by kicking me in the ribs. The wind was knocked out of me. I reeled in pain. "Come on now, boy. We have all damn day." Another kick to the ribs made me cry out. I couldn't get enough air to say anything. I had felt my ribs crack after the second kick. After I said nothing, I was met with a barrage of kicks from everyone standing around me, some adding punches to my head. They let up just long enough for me to roll onto my back. The large man picked me up by the collar, ripping my shirt. "Tommy," he said soothingly, "do you understand what's going to happen to you if you can't give me a good fucking story?" He dropped me back on the ground and looked down at me, radiating rage. I heard the boy's voice. "Speak." "I don't know. He didn't show up," I got out between staggered breaths. My captor put his foot on my chest. "Oh, he didn't? Then where the fuck did he go?" he snarled, putting more pressure onto my ribs. I howled in agony. "Please, I don't know. I waited. He never showed up. So he just took off. You're saying he just left? Try again, Tommy." He put all of his weight on me now, immune to my pleas. I felt like I would pass out soon. "Stop. He's gonna die," another voice spoke. The pressure on my chest subsided. A man with a striking resemblance to Jay approached. He looked down, questioning me without words. "He knows something," the large man growled. "He might, but he's worthless dead," Jay's brother replied. I writhed, still trying to breathe. Jay's brother motioned for the group to leave, still staring into my eyes. "Tommy, it's time you gave us some answers. My father will be here to speak with you shortly. He has a very short fuse. If I were you, I'd think about talking pretty soon," he told me. I laid on the floor. My broken ribs were preventing me from getting any sort of rest. I kept waiting to hear something from the boy. He was clearly pulling my strings, controlling the actions I would perform. It seemed odd to me that he had led me this far, and left me to my own devices in the most heated moments. I thought about what led me here. It felt like an eternity ago that my mother had died. It had only been 3 years. My father and I had both broken from her untimely demise, albeit in different ways. My father spent all of his time in front of a TV, preferring not to think about his own life, basking in the banality of reality shows to escape me. I had grown a hard exterior to protect myself from the deep pain inside. I wouldn't allow myself to feel it, instead trying to seem as impenetrable and callous as I could. I built a reputation, something I could use as a shield. It had worked well until now. I knew hours had passed before the barn doors were flying open. Stone came towards me, fists balled up. They rained down on me like sledgehammers, pummeling me so severely that it felt like a dozen people hitting me at once. I spit and coughed blood as he caught his breath, coming back for more when he was able. "Please," was all I could get out. He kept going, asking me about Jay in between beatings. I was curled up in the corner, begging for my life, when the boy's voice finally returned. "Take them to me." I flailed as Stone came flying at me once more, dodging him long enough to get a few words out. "Wait! We can find him." Stone's barrage was halted, his fists finally opening back up. He looked at me with foam running down his chin, completely unhinged. "Where?" he shouted, murder in his eyes. I didn't have to think very long. "We need to meet him at the bridge," I responded, trying to sound calm despite my wavering voice. Stone came toward me, lifting me by the throat. He glared into my eyes before dropping me to the ground. He started laughing maniacally, finally turning away and calling his men to load me up. Stone had his children and guard take me in their truck. He rode in the Cadillac with his driver. I was still zip-tied, but this time I was allowed to sit in the cab. A large man who had cracked my ribs was in charge of me, making sure to handle me as roughly as possible whenever he was able. He and Jay's two brothers passed a handle of whiskey back and forth on our drive, occasionally throwing some in my face. I was so numb at this point that it barely fazed me. "We're almost there, Tommy. Did you want to tell us what we're doing here?" One of Jay's brothers turned to ask, swerving slightly. I didn't really know. The answer came out from me as the boy manipulated me again. We're here to settle the score. They all started laughing right as we made our way down the road to the bridge. Their laughter was cut short when they saw what was in front of them. The truck came to a screeching halt. I didn't have a seatbelt on and was thrown into the seat in front of me. What the fuck? The large man gasped. It took me a little while to see what had caused us to stop. It was the boy, surrounded by flames, his puny silhouette casting an enormous shadow over us. All of the men bailed out of the truck, leaving me alone inside. The large one pulled a pistol out and began firing, emptying the clip quickly. None of the bullets seemed to hit the boy. It reached for one of Jay's brothers, taking hold of his sweatshirt and catching him ablaze. I could see how quickly they spread, covering him in seconds. He fell to the ground trying to extinguish the flames. They only grew as he screamed, his flesh melting away until he was just a skeleton, still on fire, rolling and howling until he was reduced to dust. The other one didn't make it much further, the flames consuming him as he ran for his life. The large man had taken off long before. I heard him cry out in pain from a distance. I couldn't believe what I saw when he came back into view. His head was gone. The stump of a neck spurted his blood out as he walked back into view, holding his screaming head in his hands. I finally got hold of the door handle and fell out onto the ground. I felt a pair of strong arms wrap around me, pulling me off the ground. Stone had made his way over to me, using me as a shield. The noose around Isaac's neck dragged behind him as he made his way towards us. I could feel Stone's grip loosening, his breath changing. He let go of me as his brother stepped in front of me. His eyes were empty, no pupils or irises present. Pure white stared back, his neck now held out at an unnatural angle. The noose came to life, shooting out and extending far longer than it could have been to reach Stone's throat, dragging him back towards us. No, 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 he choked out, the noose tightening until no air escaped. Stone was lifted off the ground, the noose taking him up into the air, swinging him back and forth. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. I stood rooted, watching as Isaac brought his brother back to the earth, slamming him into the ground with brutal force. Go home, Tommy, Isaac's voice boomed, seeming to come from the sky itself. Stone was found, hanging from the bridge the next morning, or at least what was left of him. His torso and limbs were never found. The bridge was scheduled to be demolished, taking away the portal between our two worlds. Isaac had come across to finish his business. It seemed fitting that he should do so on the 50th anniversary of his death. He had killed all of Stone's sons, leaving no chance of his kin surviving. I thought I had heard the last of it until a few days ago. I was sitting on my couch, listening to the rain hit the window, when I heard Isaac's voice, loud and clear. See you soon, Tommy. So I don't vet the NoSleep stories before I read them, but that was a decent one. That was a good one.